Hi friends, in this video we'll discuss about the combustion CFD simulation using Ansys Fluent, in particular species transport equations. So apart from species transport equations, there are premixed and non-premixed models also where we can use. But in this video we'll discuss about species transport. In species transport also there are many models like finite rate, eddy dissipation, or finite rate with eddy dissipation and EDC models. So EDC means eddy dissipation concept models. So what are the benefits, what are the advantages, and what are the disadvantages of each model we'll discuss in brief in the coming slides. And after that we'll try to generate the simulation and run the combustion using the Ansys Fluent. So in the second part, okay, let's go to the first one. So it is a species conservation equation. So apart from the regular Navier-Stokes equation, continuity equation and energy equation. So these are the extra equation that would be solved inside the species transport for modeling the combustion. So where Ri is the reaction. So if any species combusts and it gives the new products, so that products percentage would increase or decrease depending on the reaction rate. So that would be involved in this Ri term as a addition to the species conservation equation. And here Ji is diffusive flux. So that diffusive flux would be different for laminar and turbulent. In the laminar, it depends mainly on dim and dti, which are like diffusion coefficients for mass and diffusion coefficient for temperature. And this delta w yi is mass concentration or the gradient of the concentration, and delta t is the gradient of the temperature. So due to these gradients only, there will be diffusion that would occur in laminar flow. Whereas in the turbulent flow, with the extra term called mu t by SCT, where SCT is a quick number, so this mu t is a turbulent viscosity. These term would be added to the diffusion coefficient compared to the laminar flow. So this gives the diffusion flux for the turbulent flow, right? So this is the Ji term what we need to what exactly a solver would calculate, and depending on the flow it has, as it is laminar or turbulent. So and next term is Re, which is very important in our modeling. This Re is different for different models like laminar finite rate model or eddy dissipation model or different other models. So now we'll check with the laminar finite rate model. So laminar finite rate model use the Arrhenius equation as its base equation, in which a particular temperature and pressure and activation energy is reached. Then only the reaction will proceed forward. So if the methane is reacting with the oxygen, so then methane reacts with oxygen, gives carbon dioxide and water vapor. So in that process, when the required activation energy is attained and the required temperature is attained, then only the reaction goes in the forward direction. So this Ra, it depends on the molecular weight and the species rate. So this is the equation which is written in terms of all the species, and here you can see the reactant, and this is the product, and this Kfr Kbr is a reaction forward rate and reaction backward rate. For a non-reversible reaction, means only one way reaction, so this is the RIR. So you can see this is the RIR, which depends on the stoichiometric coefficients. This is stoichiometric coefficient of reactant, and this is the stoichiometric coefficient of product. So it depends on the stoichiometric coefficients and the forward reaction rate as well as exponential factors, right? And this tau is the third body implementation onto the reactions. So in generally this tau you can just neglect, or the Fluent would neglect this tau, or else if you want you can insert a particular value. So we'll just discuss about the reversible reaction now here. So this is a reversible reaction in which both forward as well as backward, both reaction rates would be occurring. In the non-reversible rate, only one forward rate is only present, but in the non-reversible reversible rate, both forward and backward be occurring. And now, as I've discussed, this is the third body implication on the reaction. So this is the efficiency, third body efficiency, what we need to take, and Cj is the concentration. So in general we can neglect or take it as 1. And Kfr, so this is a forward rate of reaction, which depends on the Ar, which is pre-exponential factor, beta R temperature constant, T is theta, T is the temperature, e power minus Er activation energy by universal gas constant by temperature. So these are Arrhenius equation on which it depends. This is a forward rate, and the backward rate is related to the forward rate by divided by Kr. Kr is called the equilibrium constant. So when the reaction is attained to equilibrium, so then this Kr will comes into role. So that is equilibrium constant, and this equilibrium constant obviously depends on the change in entropy and the change in enthalpy, and with respect to the temperatures and stoichiometric coefficients. So this is the general equation what we intend to solve for finite rate model. So by using this, we can calculate RIR, and the RIR would multiply with the molecular weight of the species. That gives the RI. Ri would be substituted in the species conservation equation, and finally finite volume method would be implemented in order to solve this equation. So this is a laminar finite rate model, and this model would be sufficient or would be acceptable only for laminar flow rates, not for turbulence, because due to this non-linear equation format, you can see this is itself is a non-linear equation. Non-linear equation for high turbulent flow, it is very difficult and it is not acceptable solution. So this is only possible for the laminar finite rate model, and if you have much more turbulence in nature, then it is better you go for eddy dissipation model. So in the eddy dissipation model, RIR is dependent on turbulence dissipation rate as well as turbulence kinetic energy. So in the eddy dissipation model, RIR will have the implication only on these two terms. So even though if required activation energy is not reached, or even though the particular temperature is not reached, but it doesn't care and the combustion starts occurring. So with the use of with the eddy dissipation model, you can even combust in a cooler also, in a fridge also, so which actually doesn't happen. So this is one big disadvantage. It doesn't check over activation energies or temperatures, whether the particular conditions are reached or not. It will not check. So eddy dissipation model has its drawback compared to the finite rate model, and finite rate model also has its drawback. It consumes more amount of computational time in order to solve those equations, this Arrhenius equation, right? And the next one is eddy finite rate slash eddy dissipation model. So in this model, the reactants or the reaction what we are seeing here, Ra, would be considered least among these two. So both would be calculated, and it will try to select the least among the finite rate or eddy dissipation model, and it inserts into the species transport equation. So this is another model what we can solve for. This also consumes a lot of amount of computational resources. And the next one and the last one is eddy dissipation concept model. So in the eddy dissipation concept model, it will it will simulate the reaction only for considering the small turbulent structures. So instead of huge structures, it will have only small fine structures in which it tries to calculate the reaction rates. So it also consumes very lot amount of time, because it was only trying to calculate the reaction rate for fine scales. Fine scales means fine length scales. So that fine length scale can be given as this. So this epsilon star, you can see here, is equals to C epsilon by, C epsilon into nu epsilon by k square. K is the turbulence kinetic energy, and this epsilon is eddy dissipation, and the C epsilon is a constant 2.317. So depending on this, so with respect to this equation, we'll get the length scale. So that length only it will try to solve the combustion, and this is the time through which it solves that length scale combustion. So this is the time scale and this is the length scale. So these two would be used in order to calculate or in order to progress the combustion phenomenon, and these two be used in order to have this Ra finally. And Ya is the fine scale species mass fraction over a time tau by. So how exactly the species mass fraction will change after combustion? So all those would be inculcated in this, and we'll get it will be helpful in calculating the Ra value. So this Ra would be again get introduced in the species conservation equation. So I think this is a brief description about the different kinds of models what are available in species transport equation in order to proceed with the combustion analysis, right? So in all the four models, Ra is the main term what we are intending to calculate, but approaches are different with respect to the different model. So in the next coming video, we'll just see how to model this chamber. So this is just a combustion chamber. Here you can see there is a small fuel inlet here, and from this side we are giving the air as an inlet, and this is the axis. This is the pressure outlets, and this is a mesh which has been biased towards the inlet, and it is also biased towards the wall here, or sorry, axis. So with respect to this mesh, we will try to implement these models and check how the result is being varied. So as a brief, I just want to discuss once again. So laminar finite rate model is only for a laminar flow rate structures and where the reaction rate is not instant, so it will take some time. In that cases only laminar finite rate model is very helpful. If there is so turbulence and reaction rate much depends on the turbulence, then you can go for eddy dissipation. If both are necessary, in that case you can go for finite rate eddy dissipation model. And in the eddy dissipation concept, it tries to have the reaction or combustion for finer scales of turbulence structures. So these are the different models. So we'll go for the next video in the part 2, where we'll discuss the simulation, how the results are being getting affected due to the different models. So please do subscribe and encourage me for doing more number of videos. Thank you.